All right. Sorry, guys. I think I've got it figured out now. Not 100% sure, but if anybody's on here, how about giving me a quick shout out so that I know that we are live? Looks like we got 5 or 6 people on here. Hello, hello. Hey, Dig and Chris. Awesome. I'm glad you guys made it today. All right. Well, I am a little tired today. Had a lot going on this week. But anyway, let's dig right in. Those that are jumping on here in a little bit, just rewatch where we're at. We want to talk about equipment today. So if you are right now, hi, Eric. If you are right now going from hobbyist to commercial, some of the equipment that you would probably like to look into getting, I wouldn't suggest jumping out and buying big pieces of machinery and stuff right out the gate. We didn't. We may do with a lot of manual things like wheelbarrows and pitchforks. And hey, Kayla. So I just want you guys to understand that you can move into commercial without having to spend a whole bunch of money on equipment. And we're gonna stay on focus with this today, having to do with equipment. So if you guys can give me your questions towards equipment. I will look at all comments as we're going along, but I may not be able to answer all of them, but I will go back and answer them once the video is complete. But I'm going to try to stay focused on equipment today. And then if we can, we will make more videos maybe on some of the other questions that's being asked. One of the questions, hey, AJ, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is how I got started. So if you guys would go back and look at the previous videos that we did live, we've explained that quite a few times. So I'm going to try not to repeat myself today. I am on my tablet today, so we will be able to walk around a little bit and see some of the equipment that I do have so that you guys can see some of the equipment that I use. When we first got started, one of the things that we used is a handmade sifter. And Steve used to sell these, and it fit the regular size mortar tray. And then I took that and made it to where it was. But if you can see this, let's see. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this like I thought we would. Let me turn this around. Okay. Can you guys see it right there? And then this is how it looks on the mortar tray. And that just moves back into and it sifts the worms through it. I don't think this is going to do like I wanted it to do, guys. And I'm so sorry. But we'll just have to talk about equipment. Another piece that some of you just starting out, those little green round, they're called gold mining panning strainers. We use those in the beginning. You can get a set of those on Amazon for somewhere between 75 to $100. But you could also use a strainer that you strain your spaghetti noodles in, ladies. There's so many things that you can use if you guys will just think outside the box that you don't have to go out and spend a ton of money on. But as you're moving into commercial, you will have to start looking at some bigger machinery. And that all depends on your budget. You know, I don't I don't think that you should jump out there and buy a whole lot of machinery. I personally think before anybody really jumps out there and buys a lot of things, um, that you need to learn how to market first. It's one thing to grow worms, but it's another thing to market. And if you were going to spend a lot of money, I'd say spend it on marketing and find you an affiliate. Again, it doesn't have to be me. It can be anybody that your worms, do your customer service and things like that to start with, and see how you can sell before you get too big, because worms cost money to grow, and you don't want to have a whole bunch of worms and then not be able to sell them. So that's my first little piece of advice. Let's kick this out of the way. If you guys haven't already subscribed, liked, and hit that notification bell, if you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. And just moving right along. But yes, Chris, the wire baskets from Office Supply works really good too. Do I have to worry about keeping my equipment separate from species? Okay, we have two locations. We have the location where I'm at now, which is our new warehouse, where we only are producing the pure red wigglers. This machinery is all the only thing that we use here. When we still have our farm in our backyard, and all equipment stays there, so we don't mix the two. Because yes, you could possibly contaminate your species if you're using the same equipment on the different species. Same way with gloves. If you're wearing gloves, you need to change your gloves before going from one species to the other. I know a lot of people grow their worms in one room, and that's fine, but you can take a risk of the worms crawling and getting over into another bin. So just be careful with that. I mean, you just have to be careful with it. It's very, very hard these days to find pure stock of any kind, I think. Maybe the African night crawlers and the Euros, those two seem to be pretty easy to keep apart. But I will tell you, if you're using machinery in different species, you do have the likelihood of that happening. The other things that we used in the beginning was, like I said, wheelbarrows, pitchforks, to store your you might need shelving, and you can make those. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy shelving. A lot of people make them out of cinder blocks with boards. I'm one of these. I'm very frugal, and I think that's part of the reason that we are where we're at today, is because we've been very frugal. We found things laying around, and we use those things instead of just going out and buying equipment. Now, some of the equipment that I have now, well, let me go back to this. So right now, when we bought this, we know we're going to have a cooler. And I could go out and buy one of those coolers that you just come in and you put it together, and it's good to go. And they're, $20,000. What we're going to do is we're going to buy the material and build our own cooler. And then we'll use an air conditioner with a product called CoolBot. And that CoolBot will allow that air conditioner to go down below. I think a normal air conditioner goes to 60, but this will allow that temperature to go lower than that. The winter is not too bad in here. We have found that the feeding the worms the manure does kind of heat up the warehouse a little. So we haven't had any trouble with them getting too cold, which we don't have really cold weather anyway. But the summertime, I know that we're gonna have a cooler to hold the worms. We won't necessarily have to have a cooler or have to worry too much about the worms that's in the beds. We do have big fans along with these window things that open up and pull the air across the bed. So we feel like we can keep them pretty cool that way. My favorite breeder bins is, I use the mortar trays. So they, for me, work out really good. We built shelves that are that hold, I think they hold about 10 up and down, and you can slide them in and out. And if you look at, there's one of my videos, I know, I think it's the one on our very early shipping, you can see how those are made. And I think even on our last breeder video that we did, that you can see how they're made on there. Chris, I know you've seen ours. I like those, but you have to be careful not to put too much material in them because they get very heavy. And guys, this is something too, especially for women, but I would say for you guys as well. If you buy the big mortar trays, or you buy these big 55-gallon bins and you're trying to raise worms in them, when you have to move that stuff, it's very heavy when you have moist material in it. So that's why we like the smaller mortar trays, because we can lift those and it doesn't it doesn't put as much strain on your back as if you're trying to use a lot bigger things. Now, if you're using bins that you're leaving stationary and you're dipping, you're digging the worms out and the material out, then, that's fine. But if you're having to move things around, you just want to be careful not to get big things that you've got to try to lift and tote. But I know a lot of you are going from small, here goes these flies again, are trying to go from smaller to larger, maybe to a medium, or even to, a larger farm like myself, and trying to go commercial. Hold on just 1 minute, guys. Let me hold this door. Sorry about that. I was trying to get more light in here so I don't look so dark. But when you start going big like we are, you start needing bigger equipment, and bigger equipment costs more money. The biggest piece of machinery right now that I've had to purchase was my skid steer, and I paid about $9,500 for that. Hey, Sally. Owen, good to have you too. And then we bought a small skid steer. And what we use the small skid steer for is we take the manure and we line our sidewalks. And then we take a snow blower, guys, and we roll it. We push it down that aisle into that manure, and it blows it across the beds. We were debating on whether to buy a manure spreader, which we already had a tractor when we started this business, because I used to do plants. I used to propagate and sell plants, and I had bought a tractor for that. But the manure spreader would mean that I would have to run over my beds, and I really didn't want to do that. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt them, but I just didn't want to have to try to maneuver a tractor around in here. So the little small mini skid steer, or you could use a small, I think it's an L30 Bobcat would be probably a good size for us. But we wanted something that we could get down these aisles without having to run over our beds. And my son is the one that actually thought about the snowblower. And I happened to pick one up here in Georgia from a lady that had moved down here from up north. And it was brand new, and I bought it for $300, and it works like a charm. I mean, I would have never thought about it, but he's really good about thinking outside of the box for me. Another piece of equipment, as you get bigger, you will want a trommel. You want the round trommels. You don't want a Brockwood sifter, because a Brockwood sifter, I have trouble with the with it really clogging the screens. And there's just not enough length there for the material to really clean your worms. It works really good for castings on a small scale. I mean, if you were just doing like cup and bait, or just doing on a smaller scale, they would work out really good. Or using the bucket system, they work really good for that. But if you're trying to do large quantities, then a trommel is definitely the way that you want to go. Or at least it has been for me. I love my trommels. I actually have about 4 of them. I have 2 at my property, at my house in my backyard, and then I have 2 over here that we use. Maybe 3 over here we use. But and Sally, I know you have a trommel pretty much like mine. And I tell you, if you're in the worm business and you're wanting to separate your worms, especially if you're trying to get large quantities, and to me, 20 pounds and up is large quantities. I was trying to get, a couple of 100 pounds a day, and it was taking me, 8 hours a day just to get up, 5 or 6 pounds of worms. And I knew there had to be a better way. So we built some screens that we use, once the worms are screened, or come through this trommel, they still have a little bit of material on them. And so we started putting castings in we started using the mortar trays and putting castings in them. And then I cut some screens the size of the mortar tray. We put the worms on top of those and let the worms move down into those castings. That way, when we rerun the worms, then they're coming out almost clean enough to sell. You still have to let them sit for about 5 minutes and clean that last little bit off the top, but it's not much at all. And we can get about 200 pounds a day doing that than the way that we were trying to do it in the beginning, where we were just using the lights and, raking it off and waiting for them to go down some more and then raking it off. It just took too long to do that. And the worms would get warm on you too. So, it was really tough during the summer. So, let's see, what else are we using? We're using the mortar trays. CFTs are good if you're wanting to produce castings. They're not as good if you're wanting to produce worms. But for casting use, they are excellent. If I was a castings producer, I would have CFTs, and that would be the easiest thing to use. You could actually put some conveyors under those. But a lot of people, there's 2 ways that you can do them. We have a couple that we build at home, and we use a rake underneath to pull the castings down. But you can buy the ones that have the blade that goes across, and then the castings fall down the bottom. And if you had a conveyor under there, you could, convey those right on up into a super sack, unless you want to, sift them. Now, some people do sift them even after they've had them in the CFTs, because sometimes you'll still have worms that go down and you want to get your worms out. And then also some people want to make sure that, they just have really light, fluffy castings. So it kind of depends on you and how you want to do, your castings. Let's see what else we use. We use, in the beginning, we used the urban worm bags. We have about 6 of those. And those are really good for home composting people who, they act like a CFT, because you take the material from the bottom of them and you feed at the top. And for somebody that's limited on space but can have them inside, those are really good to use. Let's see. We've used the bucket system. When we originally started, we found a person that sold us some of the Unco equipment. They had the shaker, and it worked okay, but you really have to make sure there's no clumps in there. If you went to the Arizona Worm Farm conference, they showed you how you have to break all that up before you put it through that sifter, or you're just going to wind up with a lot of your castings clumped up at the bottom. And so you want to make sure that you get that all clumped up. But that's really another good system to use, though, if you're doing the bucket system. We use the buckets now not to grow our worms in, but we use them to, when we're getting our orders up, we put our peat moss in them. Then we put let's say we have 5 orders of 100 count. We'll have our peat moss in those 5 buckets. We'll get our 100 count worms ready. We'll put them in those 5 buckets. Then we mix them up, and it just kind of like an assembly line. So those buckets are working out pretty good. Hey, so some of the other things that you're going to need is a computer, a printer. We have a label printer. We use it's called Off Nova, and I bought that from Amazon. It was fairly inexpensive, and it does the 4x6 labels. And we've used ShipStation, and we've used Pirate Ship. Now, I love Pirate Ship because Pirate Ship doesn't cost you anything, but they don't work with Amazon. They worked with Shopify, but they won't work with Amazon. So we went to ShipStation because they would interchange with Amazon. So then I connected my Shopify as well so that I could just keep all that, and my eBay. So ShipStation pretty much connects to all of those: Etsy, Shopify, eBay, Amazon, but they do charge you so much a month. I think it starts, I believe, at $29 a month up to so many labels, and then so much a month after that. It could get pretty expensive. So all these little things that we use in the business, your softwares and stuff, can start getting kind of expensive, because even with Shopify, we have little add-ons that we've purchased to do email marketing, to do upselling and things like that. And you have to pay for all that, so those things you just have to be careful, because $9 and $10 a month adds up. And so you just have to see if it's going to actually benefit, make sure that you're making enough off of it to have that. If you're not going to use it, or you're not using it, or a lot of these have free trials. So I would tell you to try it out. If you're going to use it and it's paying for itself, then use it. But if it's not, get rid of it. Don't let it just keep billing you every month and keep paying for it. Some of those things, we think they're going to be great, and then they wind up not being. We also use QuickBooks for our accounting, and you can have it where your accountant can log into your account and keep up with all your bookkeeping for you, or you can set up your own bookkeeping. And me and Steve do mine, and and it's really easy. It's really not that hard. And then at the end of the year, you can just print that out and take it to your CPA and have them do your taxes. All that would already be all in one little, all your expenses are all labeled out and everything. So it's really easy to do. If you start shipping, you're going to need boxes and tape and labels. The boxes, we use Priority Mail. We get our boxes free. There's 3 sizes that we use. We use the box number 4, which is a 7x7x6. No, yeah, 7x7x6. And we do our 1 pounders and anything below that. When we get to 2 pounds, we use a regular box that I have to buy. It's 11x8x6. And then when we get 3 pounds to 5 pounds, no, 3 pounds and 4 pounds, we use flat rate USPS boxes. And then anything from there up to 8 pounds, we use the large flat rate box. We don't package anything more than 8 pounds in one box. So if somebody orders 10 pounds, then we do a 8-pound flat rate, and we do a 11x8x6 for the other 2 pounds. But I try to tell people when they're buying worms to buy the bulk. If you're going to do bulk, you want to do it in 8-pound increments to save yourself on shipping. So you can use like we sell worm combs. You can use bubble envelopes for those. On our boxes, we make labels that says live worms on them so that the Postal Service knows that there's live worms in the boxes so that they don't set them out in the sun, even though sometimes they do. Um, uh, then let's see what else you guys are going to need. Tape can get pretty expensive. Now, we buy our tape from Uline, and we buy it 36 rolls to the case. But I would tell you to probably look around. We're going to try to start looking around for some more things that don't cost quite as much, but tape can get pretty expensive. You're going to need a shredder for cardboard if you're going to do shipping, because when you ship, you want to use shredded cardboard and not shredded paper. Your worms are going to sweat. And if that paper gets wet, it mats up and it won't let the air circulate in your box to keep your worms cool or warm. And so you need to use the cardboard, and that cardboard, when it gets a little wet, it's not going to mat up. And then you have, usually cardboard is corrugated, so you can have a better airflow in your boxes. We also drill holes in our boxes so that the heat can escape out of those boxes. And that is one of the ways that we have learned to ship and have such a high rate of success on our shipping. But now, mind you, if the Postal Service is setting your worms out in the sun or on a dock or on a tarmac before they put them on a plane, it is not going to matter how you package those worms. They're going to get hot and they're going to die. So we had some trouble with some orders last week. And, I feel like they really mishandled our products because I shipped them the same way I always have, but I seem to have a little more trouble last week than normal. So, and it could just be that it's Amazon customers because, a lot of people who buy from Amazon or eBay, they really haven't done their due diligence. Like many of them didn't have their beds ready. They were contacting me wanting to know how to make their beds. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you don't even have your beds ready yet for these worms to go into. So, that's just part of dealing with Amazon customers and eBay customers. Kayla, the best place to buy the mortar trays is either Home Depot or what's the other one? Home Depot and Lowe's. That's where I buy mine. I like the mortar trays. They have the little tape measure looking thing on the sides of them. Because one or the other of them sell the other ones that don't have that, and they hurt my hands and they're not as wide, and they hurt my hands when I'm lifting them, but they're just a rough, they have a curve in them and they're just rough on my hands. And then, so you have mice that's finding yours, Kayla. I would just put out some mice, bait, or put some screen over. I know some people use screens on the top of theirs. I don't have tops on any of mine. And the other good thing is if you can get you some cats, some barn cats, and that'll help keep the mice down too. I know here in Georgia, we've coming into February, March, we're going to have the robins start coming in. And if you guys have windrows outside, you need to make sure your beds are covered because those robins will eat all of your worms. I mean, they can have them gone in one day. It's amazing. I had that happen last year. Do I use rubber gloves? Honestly, I very seldom wear gloves. I just love to have my hands in the dirt. And if I have gloves on, then I don't get to feel the dirt and I don't get to feel the worms. But I will tell you, if you are, if you've got any open sores or anything like that, you would definitely need to wear some gloves. Now, I wore gloves this week because I had a problem with a fingernail and I didn't want it to get infected. And so I did wear gloves this week. Do I have a recommendation on a good starter chipper shredder? Chris, I did see that Home Depot had one that I thought about purchasing. I will tell you, don't get the one from Harbor Freight, not the little green one from Harbor Freight. Now that new bigger one that they have, the red one, I think that would probably do well. And I have an old Craftsman, and that's the one that we use when we use it. We use that usually to shred up my peat moss because it makes it light and fluffy, and it actually goes further. Then on the IBC totes, yes, I have used the IBC totes, and they do work really well. You just want to make sure that you have some holes in the bottoms of them. I've used wooden crates. I've used some plastic. They use them in the farms. They're about the size of a pallet, and they're plastic. And we just drilled some holes in those, so that if we overfilled or if the rain, came in, because we leave everything open. We don't cover much of anything other than when the robins come through. And I'm trying to think of things that I did prior to the way that I do things now, because being inside, I don't have to have as much of the other equipment and stuff that I used to have or felt like I had to have. Because I don't use my tractors in here. I don't use the big skid steers in here for the worm farm. Now we use the big skid steer to bring the manure from outside to the pad on the inside, and then we use the small mini skid steer to put it down the walkways. And we tried putting cardboard through a chipper shredder, and I mean, it works out fine if you're wanting to use that for food, but it's not good for shipping. For shipping, you're going to need the crosscut shredder. You want to get I say it's the crosscut. It's the one that makes the longer strips, not the little bitty, looks like, minute little pieces, because then you're just getting back into things getting moist in there and clogging up and not giving you the airflow that you need. Let's see. Trying to think of what else things you guys are going to need. It is time consuming to do cardboard. One of the things that I did, I've bought several different shredders for cardboard. And the one that I like the best is the Amazon Basic. It's roughly about close to $200, but I have not had it run hot on me. There's another one that we bought that was recommended, and it does really well for cardboard, but it goes really slow. And I don't have time for things to be slow. I need things to move. So we really like the Amazon Basic. And we usually go to Dollar General and get all of the cardboard that we can shred. And I have a lady that works a couple of hours a day just on cardboard and taping boxes. And then I have my 14-year-old grandson that does cardboard after school. So, and yes, we pay him too. But if I were just using cardboard to feed my worms, I would just rip it up. I would soak it and then just rip it up and put it in my beds. But when you're on a commercial level and you have to harvest worms, it takes a while for them to eat that cardboard down, and then it clogs your trommel and stuff like that. So I like the pit moss for my breeder bins, but I don't use that for my beds that I'm going to harvest to ship, because again, it takes it a while to do. No gas. Sally, you're not going to see me with gloves on too often. Like I said, I just really enjoy my hands being in the soil and the feel of the worms, and it just really takes that stress away from me. I don't get under too much stress in this business, but there are those days that you do get stressed out a little bit, and you can go play in the worms, and that stress will just leave you. So I really don't wear gloves very seldom. Let's see. Peat moss is what we use to ship in. So if you get to a point to where you start shipping, you definitely want to have peat moss. And I buy my peat moss from Lowe's. It's the white and blue with some burgundy on the bag. I think it says organic on it. And then I run it through a chipper shredder, and it makes it because there's always some little bit of sticks and some clumped up peat moss, and I like to really run that through the shredder to make it really light and fluffy, and then we use it from that. Does coffee grounds work fine for grit? I don't think you use coffee grounds for grit. Somebody else can help me out there, because I never used coffee grounds on my beds. I do know you have to be careful because they will heat up and kill your worms if you use too much. But if any of y'all have used coffee grounds, y'all might could answer Joe's question for him. I know, Joe, for grit, in my breeder beds, I just use place sand, good clean place sand, and you don't have to use a whole lot. Now, if you are growing worms for castings, you don't want to use sand in your beds, because that'll put sand in your castings when they come through. Now, we grow our worms on we grow them on the ground, but we have a layer of sawdust down. But the worms can go down into past the sawdust and eat some sand or dirt that's under there for their grit. So we don't add any extra grit to the worms. If you have them in bins, though, you do need to give them some grit. But one of y'all asked me about the pit moss over peat moss. One thing we had happen, actually this week, we had some peat moss that kind of heated up on us. Normally, when we put our worms in peat moss, we let it, when we make a food bedding, and we normally let it heat up for about a week, and then use it. So we had some heat up on us this week. So I had to hurry up and get the worms out of it. And I used some coconut coir, because it was cool, and it stayed cool, and it cooled the worms back down. So, but I was glad that I caught my worms in time. And you guys, I know I look very tired. I can see it on the screen myself, and I am very tired. But I wasn't going to miss this day, and I wanted to help you guys out with any information that I could give you. AJ says that coffee is not grit, it is a food source. And New Soil says coffee grounds are food, it's nitrogen, and the worms break it down, they just pass it through. Cool. Let's see. Trying to see if I got any questions on here that I can help with. Somebody asked something right at the beginning. Okay, Chris, you asked me about how we store our bulk bedding food supplies like manure, wood chips, sawdust, gin trash, etc. So our manure is dumped outside. It's just straight outside. Same thing with the wood chips and the sawdust. The gin trash, we try to keep that dry until we use it, because once it gets wet, it starts to break down, and which is fine. You can use gin trash once it's been decomposed. It makes a really good food source too, but we find that the worms really like it fresh. But once it gets wet, the black soldier flies will get into that, and then you just have a lot of black soldier flies in your bed. So we try to keep that dry. We have a shelter on the new warehouse, and that's usually where we put that. Our Purina worm chow, we have 55-gallon food grade drums that we use, and we buy about 50 bags at a time, and we put it in those drums to store it, and then we just scoop out to feed our beds. We have in the last 2 weeks started feeding our beds the worm chow because we want to get some really good breeding going on, and we want to fatten up the worms that are in there, and then we need to harvest those so that we can split them up to continue to build these beds. That we've still got 3.5 beds to build here before we can start selling the red wigglers out of it. I'm sure it's going to be fall before we can ship out of here, you guys. So I know a lot of y'all have been asking me about the red wigglers, the pure stock, but I just won't have them. We're hoping that late fall we'll be able to start selling those. If we do before then, y'all know I'm going to announce it. So as soon as we can, I will be announcing that we have them for sale. But it's going to be a little while yet. So let's see. Watermelon and coffee grains help out with reproduction. How much to give and how often? Eric, one thing, anytime you feed your worms, you never want to put more food in there until they've actually ate everything that you've already put in there. And everybody has to understand the worms are actually eating the microbes. So what I always did when I fed them watermelon and cantaloupe and all of that stuff was, first of all, make sure you use something that's going to absorb any extra moisture, because as that breaks down, you're going to have a lot of water coming out of it, and you don't want all that in your bed, because it will cause it to go sour on you. What you'll need to do is put you some shredded paper down or cardboard, then put your food on top of that, put you a little bit more cardboard or paper, and then cover it up. You don't want it way down in the bed, but you want it towards the top of the bed. And that'll also cut down on your fruit flies and things like that. Put you a little bit of grit on top of it. But I always waited till that was gone, and then a few more days before I fed again. I made sure there was nothing left before I fed. Same way that we do in our rows out here. We don't feed them any more of the worm chow until that worm chow that we just fed them is gone. And then we wait a day or two, and then we feed again. And we put it in rows about 12 inches apart. So the next time we feed, we put it in the row where we didn't put it in the last time. And that way it just keeps the worms going through the manure and everything else on the top. And right now we're feeding about once a week the manure. So as we warm up, though, we'll have to start feeding them more often. So right now we're running the sprinklers once a day for 1 minute. Come summer, we'll probably increase that all the way up to 3 times a day. Which, that's another thing. If you guys decide to go with windrows outside, you really need to have some automated water if at all possible. Because let me tell you, trying to water windrows, in order to get them wet enough, you're going to be out there all day long spraying one windrow just to get it wet enough. So I would tell you, get you an automated, they sell them at Lowe's. They're somewhere between $75 to $100. You can program it and it'll turn the water off and on, have you some sprinklers out there, or you can run some of that. We use the black line, and then we had the little misters that connected to that. And I spent a lot of money on water because I bought things and it didn't work. And then it just wasn't enough. And then I redid it. I probably spent $10,000 trying to get water right on windrows outside. It was a nightmare. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. Drinking coffee, trying to stay awake. But when you work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, guys, this is the way you look. But I am going to go home and take me a nap when I get off of here today. But let's see. Hey V, how are you? How many worms did I have before I made my first sale? Probably. Now, when I first started, I was doing euros because I wanted the fishing market, because that's what I love doing. I love to fish. Fishing is my favorite thing to do. Worm farming is right there with it. So I probably had 20 or 30 pounds before I started selling anything. And then I found a supplier that wasn't too far from me to buy some worms from, and I started selling from there. But 2020, was it 2020 or 2021 when COVID hit? That's when I really got into the red wigglers, because the business drove me to that, because that's where that's what everybody was wanting. We still do really good with the euros, but we do a lot more with the red wigglers. So yeah, AJ, I'm gonna get me some sleep. There you go, V. You got to go grind you some worm chow. That's why I just buy the FRM. It's already pre-made. That I wouldn't even have time to grind my own. I think it's great if you have that time and you can, really perfect anything that you can do, and you have the time to do it. That is wonderful. But I will tell you, when you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, there's a lot of those things that you're going to find that you're not going to be able to do that you were able to do on a smaller scale. And that's what we have found. There's just sometimes, because time is money. If I could find somewhere to buy shredded cardboard, I would be buying cardboard. I would not be paying people to stand here and just shred cardboard, because I would have them doing something else. But I haven't been able to find anywhere or anyone that, would shred cardboard and sell it to me. So, but yes, if you can do those things, it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But I've gotten to the point, my time, I already don't get any sleep and any rest, because honestly, if I get 4 hours of sleep, I'm doing good. If I get 6 hours, I've overslept. So, and that's 7 days a week. But I do enjoy doing what I do. And when you're growing, you got growing pains, and you're in that area where you can't really afford to hire more help. So you have to do it yourself to get through that transitional period to where you're making enough to pay another person. So that's kind of where we're at. We're not quite where we can hire more help. So somebody's got to do it. And, I'm the owner, so guess who gets to do it? And I'm glad you could join us, V. I really enjoyed your video last night, sitting and listening. And let's see. Am I going to keep the breeder bins once your windrows are done? Joe, I'll probably always have some breeder bins. Just because you never know. I've killed a bunch of worms, making a simple mistake. And, sometimes it's just as simple as you've bought your same supplies. Say for instance, we get our manure from the same place all the time. And But before I feed my worms anything out of that new load, I always do a test. I use a small container with 25 worms, put them in there for 24 hours to see how they react. And if they're fine, then I use it. But I used some feed stock that they had gave me, and did that, and it killed the worms in less than a minute. And if I'd have put that on my whole bed, I would have lost every one of my worms. So thank God I did that. And that's something I would tell you guys to do. Anytime you're feeding them a new bag of anything or a new stock of anything, even if it's same place you've been getting it, do a trial on it before you use it on your entire beds, especially windrows or where you've got a lot of worms or a bunch of your breeder trays and things like that. But I probably won't have as many breeder trays as I do now, but I'll always do it during the winter because I can control that environment and I can hatch more worms throughout the winter by having that control. So I'll always have some breeder bins going. Let's see, what else? Did you guys have any more questions that I could help you guys with? Just trying to think of any other equipment that we've used or we do use. You're going to need scoops. We use those. I call them feed scoops from Tractor Supply. I did find them on Amazon. I think a little bit cheaper. And we ordered several of them. I have probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 of those laying around just because. Another thing that we use is we use a brush. When we had those screens on top of our castings where we put in the worms that's come through the trommel and they're sitting there and the lights over them, we take these come from Harbor Freight. They're soft, and that's what we brush our worms with to get the rest of that material off. And it doesn't hurt your worms because it's a real soft bristle. So we buy these by the cases because they wound up getting misplaced or we just use them a lot. We also use these for when you're pouring out your breeder pans and you want to make sure that you get all your worms and your cocoons out. We use the brushes for that too, and that works really good. And if any of you've ever used a trommel and your bedding was wet, those worms stick. We've used these brushes to get the worms off of those too. We try not to do that. I wish somebody would come up with some type of brush you could put on a trommel to where you could run that wetter and your worms would still fall down. Sally, maybe we can come up with something that'll work. After I divide my cocoons into 4 or 5 breeder bins, when all the babies hatch, what do you do then? What I do, once they're just before I see their clitellums, I'm putting them out here in the windrows. But if you're like in your situation where you have yours at, and you've got them in 4 or 5 bins, depending on how many worms you're seeing in that one mortar tray, you could just leave them in that mortar tray and grow them on out. But if you're seeing more than 1 to 2 pounds, or you think it's more than 1 to 2 pounds, then you divide them some more because you want to give them enough space that they will continue to grow bigger. Because the name of the game is, if you're selling worms by the weight, then you want a bigger worm. And honestly, more people complain about scrawny worms than they do anything. So you want those worms when you're shipping them out to be as big and plump because they're going to dehydrate some in shipping. So you want them to be, as big as they can be when the customer gets them. Of course, once they spritz them in about 24 to 48 hours, they're going to be just as plump as they were when you shipped them. But a lot of people don't know that. We've actually had to start adding that into our Amazon orders. I did a little card to explain to people, your worms are going to look small and scrawny and they're not going to have a lot of movement. But if you just give them a spritz of water and wait 24 to 48 hours before you tell me your worms are dead, then, I mean, if they're dead, great, we'll replace them. But if they're just not moving and you think they're dead, they just need some water. They just need to get hydrated back up. And, so we had to start explaining this to people so that we would not have to replace worms that really aren't dead. Yeah, and it was probably an eBay customer, I'm sure. They're just unique, and I buy from eBay and I buy from Amazon, because I don't have time to go to the stores. So I do a lot of online shopping, but I have learned to read the fine print. I have learned, to ask questions before I just go I don't think I've ever given anybody a negative review. I think I've just never reviewed if I wasn't really happy, just because anything can happen. I don't think that people are out there just to be trying to, I don't think people are selling on Amazon and eBay to rip you off. But I think there are people that buy off of eBay and Amazon that try to rip the sellers off. Yeah, I'm like you, V. I like eBay and Amazon as well, but it can drive you crazy. And it's mainly because you really can't have that conversation like you can on your own site. And you probably experienced this, V. If they're buying off of your site, you have control of being able to reach out to that customer, whether by phone, text, or email. When you're dealing with Amazon and eBay, you have to go through their system, and you have to be careful of how you word things. And you have to, and it's just not the same as when you're talking to someone and writing to someone, because written form can be perceived in so many ways. I just had it out with a customer, not a customer, but a potential customer the other day, just because I wrote his name in capital lock. My lock was on, and it was just his name. And he thought I was screaming at him. And I'm like, oh, dear Jesus, no, I just had my locks on, cap lock. And it was only your name. So no, I wasn't screaming at you. But he reminded me that capital locks was screaming. And wouldn't accept my apology either. But that's okay, because he won't be my customer. And that's the nice thing about owning your own business, is you can choose your customers too. I mean, I bend over backwards, give them the shirt off my back, but there is a limit to where I'll go with things. And yeah, he will never be a customer of mine. I can promise you that. All right, guys, we're almost an hour in. Any more questions? Let's see. Yeah, AJ, some of those customers, you just got to shake your head. And it's just funny because I don't have that kind of customer either in person or from my own website. It's only the customers that we have from the other two online things, You're very welcome, sweetie. And guys, I hope that I've at least helped a little bit. I know my brain wasn't functioning as sharply as I would like to have today, but do I use misters to keep the beds wet? And do you water frequently for short periods of time to keep surface damp without making bed overly wet? So, Brian, it depends on what you're trying to do. If we touched on this last week, and V can tell you the same thing. If you are breeding worms, you want your beds to be a lot moister than a wrung out sponge. You just don't want standing water. But I do use misters, yes. On my windrows, even here we use misters. Actually, we use a pop-up sprinkler, but it's like a mist that comes over. And because inside the beds stay moist longer, so I do a 1 minute mist once a day. But my breeder trays, if you go back and look at, if you're ever on my Facebook, there's a video that I did an update on yesterday. It's just a real short clip. It's, I don't know, a couple of seconds maybe, or not a couple of seconds, but maybe 30 seconds and you can just hear the moisture in that mortar tray, but you don't see standing water. And that's if you're breeding. If you're trying to do castings, you would have to dry that out to run it through your sifters. How many people do I have working on my farm currently? Still the same amount, Chris. There's just 3 of us, but it's my son now instead of Sean. So it's me, Tabitha, and Sean. I mean, me, Tabitha, and Blake. My son works for me now instead of Sean. And then my son's girlfriend is the one that does the cardboard and paper. So I guess technically I do have another hand, but she just does cardboard and all, and she really just does it to be up here with him. So thank you, AJ. It means a lot to me to hear that from you, and thank you, Dig. I appreciate that. I'm really just I'm trying to learn more about this YouTube stuff, AJ. I saw that I think you're using YardStream now. Are you liking that? Is it a little bit easier than just the YouTube lives, or YardStream, y'all, is some software that you can use with YouTube, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to do live videos. And I think it gives you a little bit more things that you can do with it than YouTube does. I know editing is one thing that's kind of hard for me to do on YouTube when I'm doing my not live streaming, but just doing my other ones. So he says it's a great investment. I'm gonna have to look into that. I've had several people ask me or tell me that was a good platform to use. The editing is what gets me on YouTube, because I can't never seem to get my mouse right where I want it. It's hard to figure out sometimes. And so I wonder if YardStream would be easier for the editing part. So it's very professional and very engaging. Is that what y'all were using? I think that's what y'all were using last night when y'all were doing the live with them, right? Awesome, Chris. Love to have you. Some people just love to be fragile. You mean frugal? Yeah, you definitely have to be frugal in business. You can waste a lot of money in business if you're not careful. If you think you got to have all the bells and whistles to get started, I tell people all the time, just get started. And don't y'all, growing pure red wigglers. Yes, we are doing that because we do have people that really want that. But don't let that be the reason you don't go ahead and start selling worms. Because right now it's very hard to find anybody that can sell on a large, massive amount of red wigglers that are pure. And people still want to compost. And the blues are great composters. You may have to figure out what they like or don't like it, just like any other worm. But if they're in CFTs, Lord, my goodness, they're great composters, and they make some of the best castings. Thank you, Sally. There's a free version that allows you to have 6 people. Any more than that, and I believe you have to pay. Huh. Yes, we were using YardStream. Have you used YardStream yet, V? We need to have a conversation about the affiliate link on my website. All right, Kayla, if you've got my phone number, call me. If you don't, guys, it's 229-507-0203. give me a quick call and we'll get you figured out. There is a trial link in the description box of that recent live stream if you're interested. AJ, I plan on going through that. I do. Thank you, New Soul. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all those likes you give me on my Facebook and Instagram too. Awesome, V. Yeah, let's go through AJ's and support him on that. Guys, we have to support each other. We're all in this to help. And honestly, the only thing that I'm asking out of this live and sharing my information is for you guys to like, to hit that notify button, to just help me build my YouTube channel. You know, watch my videos when you have time. You know, eventually I think, and AJ, you may know this better than me, but I know to get monetized on here, you have to have, I think, 1,000 subscribers and then so many hours watched and, you know, and all those things. But, you know, I'll just be happy to just see this channel grow, and very happy to give the information that I have. I know many of you have always heard me say that, I'm not scared of competition because there's so much of a market out there for all of us. And I truly do mean that. So I'm just trying to pay forward and help someone else, you know, if it would provide a living for them. Because listen, people, we are in some bad times in this world. And, you know, we need to know how to grow food. We need to know how to get the most food out of what we're growing. You know, one of my favorite things to do is to can. I have an upstairs room over my garage that is just full of canning. And last year I wasn't able to grow my own food, but we had a farmer's market and I just went and bought and I can peas and beans and all kinds of stuff. So what's the name of it again? The name of the software is StreamYard. You're very welcome, David. I'm trying to answer questions too, y'all. Yep. I will probably do 4,000. Is that 4,000 hours watched, AJ? Bye, Garden Lady. Thank you. Thank you, New Soul. I appreciate that. And anybody that's on here, if y'all have YouTube channels, put it down in the comments, and let's all make sure that we're subscribing to each other's channels, and let's support and help each other out. It really means a lot to us in this worming community to stick together and help one another out. At least it does to me. And so if I can help someone in the same way they're helping me, I will be glad to. Bye, V. I do understand I've got to get off here pretty soon too. Which brings me to that. So I would love to stay here for a little while longer, you guys, but I feel that I do need to get home and get some rest. Tomorrow we won't be shipping because it's President's Day. So we are going to do some sifting tomorrow. So need to get rested up for that. And thank you, Kayla. I hope that you guys have gotten something out of this. My biggest tip to all of y'all is to think outside the box before you jump out there and you spend tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, if you just have money to burn and you want to do that, then do it. So yeah, we need 1,000 subscribers and 400 watched hours. Live stream will help you get the hours quickly as well. And then no customers offended by accidental caps. Yes, they were. Thank you, AJ. All right, guys. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening. Kayla, give me a call or email, whatever's convenient for you, and we'll see if we can't get whatever problem you're having figured out. Yes, stay warm, guys. Y'all keep them worms growing. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday afternoon. If you make it to church tonight, say a prayer for me. Y'all have a good evening.